me, Liao, with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. South Korean officials will begin safety inspections on all Boeing 737-800 aircraft operated by the country's airlines as they try to figure out what caused Sunday's deadly Jeju airplane crash. Only 2 of the 181 people on board the plane survived the disaster. It's prompted countries around the region, including Taiwan, to look at their own safety mechanisms. Joyce Sung reports.
Authorities in South Korea are still racing to identify bodies 2 days after the shocking crash of a Jeju Air passenger plane at Muan Airport, the country's worst ever air travel disaster. The passenger plane traveling from Thailand to the airport in South Korea's southwest killed 179 people, all but 2 people on board. Mourning family members can only pray and wait for all victims to be found, with some urging officials to hire more people to aid the effort. A test for the country's acting president Choi Sang-mok here at a memorial for the victims who took office less than 48 hours before the crash.
겨울이지만 온도가 굉장히 지금 올라가고 있습니다. 그러다 보니 유족들의 시신들이 급속히 부패가 이루어질 상황이 발생을 할 수가 있더라고요.
Questions remain about what exactly happened after the pilot made a mayday call reporting a bird strike. The Boeing 737-800 aircraft then made an emergency belly landing without its gear and wheels, skidding and then slamming into a concrete wall, almost 250 meters after the end of the runway. Muan Airport was known to have a runway nearly a kilometer shorter than most international airports.
It really has to be a series of catastrophic events that lead to such a high loss of life. It is incredibly unusual.
Following the deadly crash, concerns in neighboring Taiwan arose over the safety of its own Songshan airport. Though not the country's main air hub, Songshan is right in the capital city, with a runway that's 2,600 meters long, 200 meters shorter than that at Muan Airport. But Taiwan's Transport Safety Authority has reassured that Songshan's safety features are in good order and explained that the end of the runway is fitted with a crushable material called Engineered Materials Arresting Systems, or EMAS, designed to stop aircraft that overrun.
EMAS 本身是一个轻质混凝土的结构，也就是说，当飞机在一定的速度撞到这个轻质混凝土，飞机里面的发动机跟飞机的蒙皮结构都不会受到任何的损害，所以这个轻质混凝土就会散成一个粉末状。
The material was installed following a 2004 incident at the airport, where a TransAsia Airways plane overran the runway, coming just 15 meters short of a barrier. But aviation experts say that EMAS material may not be enough if aircraft are making emergency landings at high speeds. As renewed scrutiny falls upon airport designs and safety, these families in South Korea are now camped out at the airport, in shock and inconsolable as they wait to be reunited with their loved ones' remains. Kamashu and Joyce Sun for TaiwanPlus.
The United States says that Chinese state-sponsored hackers were able to access computers of U.S. Department of Treasury employees. It's one of a string of Chinese state-sponsored hacks that has become public in recent years. Chris Gorin has more.
Chinese state-sponsored hackers were able to gain access to internal documents of the U.S. Treasury Department. That's according to a letter from the Treasury to the Senate's Banking Committee. Now, in short, the letter says that on December 8th, the department was notified by a third-party software provider called Beyond Trust that a key for one of its cloud services had been compromised by a Chinese state-sponsored actor. That actor was able to access certain employee workstations along with several unclassified documents maintained by those users. They added that the compromised service was taken offline and that there's no evidence that the hackers still have access to Treasury information. The Chinese embassy in Washington has denied that Beijing was involved in the hack. And China has always denied involvement in any hacks against U.S. systems, but there have been several well-publicized attacks against such systems attributed to Chinese state-sponsored actors. While from a U.S. perspective, it's certainly not good that these Chinese hacks have succeeded, a cybersecurity expert I spoke with told me the fact that many of these state-sponsored actors have been publicly identified indicates that U.S. cyber defense is working. After all, these are clandestine operations. And there may be U.S. hacking operations against China that are successful but haven't been made public. So this is all part of the espionage game played between major powers. And it's not likely to be the last state-sponsored hack that we're going to hear about. Joseph Wu, Ryan Wu, Alec McDonald, and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
In his 2025 New Year address, Chinese President Xi Jinping has restated his claim that Taiwan will be unified with China.
两岸同胞一家亲，谁也无法隔断我们的血脉亲情，谁也不能阻挡祖国统一的历史大势。
The comments are similar to remarks made last year when Xi said China would surely be unified and that both sides of the Taiwan Strait should have a common purpose. Beijing considers Taiwan part of its territory, a claim Taiwan's government rejects. Xi also laid out his goals for 2025, including China's technological advancement and self-reliance. Taiwan is reporting 5 Chinese military aircraft operating around the country since Monday, 3 of which flew closer and breached the country's Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ. This is all part of a record amount of military activity from China this year, as our reporter Jaime Ocon explains.
2024 has been a record-setting year for Chinese military activity around Taiwan, with Beijing setting a record high number of aircraft breaching Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ. That's this white box here that surrounds Taiwan. Now, looking at the data over the years, when Taiwan's military first made this information public in 2020, we saw the number of incursions annually at a little bit less than 400. The actual number is 390. But since then, incursions have skyrocketed, and now we're seeing over 3,000 Chinese military aircraft breach the ADIZ in a year. So how did we get there? Well, looking at total activity through 2024, a lot of analysts are pointing to May, which is coincidentally the same month in which Lai Ching-te, right here, the same month in which Lai Ching-te, current President Lai Ching-te, was inaugurated. We can see a clear correlation between his inauguration and activity kind of surging. Now, I want to go back to this map over here that shows Taiwan's different ADIZ sections. Now, it's not just about the numbers. China is also changing the way in which it operates within Taiwan's ADIZ. What we used to see is China's military kind of operating here in the southwest section. They would breach this corridor, stay there for a few hours, and then return pretty much a U-turn back to base. And the purpose of that is to put pressure on Taiwan's military. What we're seeing now is something a little bit different. What we're seeing now is China conducting more complex operations, breaching the southwest corridor, wrapping around, and even sometimes operating on the east coast of Taiwan. Now, earlier I spoke to Ben Lewis. He's a defense analyst who tracks Chinese military activity in the region, and he says that this is all part of a new transition.
Well, I think so far what we've seen is they've transitioned to a focus on actually training in ways that matter to them, right? When we first started getting information on these activities, based on what we were told at least, it seemed like the PLA was it was for presence. We want to be around Taiwan. We want to be in the Southwest ADIZ. After Pelosi visited in August 2022, it became, we're going to erase the median line. We're going to assert ourselves on both sides of the median line in the Taiwan Strait. Then in 2023, into 2024 especially, it became much more about, okay, now we have essentially de facto control over these areas or freedom of movement in these areas. How can we best utilize that to develop our forces? So you mentioned the combat readiness patrols. Those increased in number. Taiwan is tracking much more PLA activity on its east flank in the Western Pacific. That's a relatively new trend. I anticipate that will continue.
When we look at the numbers going from barely 1,000 to doubling that, now we're pushing past 3,000 incursions every year. What happens next? What can Taiwan do to combat this rise, this clear rise in aggression from China?
To be honest, I don't think the acute nature of the challenge has been communicated well to the public. I think that the strain that this is putting on Taiwan's armed forces is understated by the MND. I think the intensity of dealing with these aircraft that are flying such that sometimes the MND only has minutes to assess where they're going to go and how they need to respond to that. And I think it derives from a lack of transparency from the MND to fully understand the picture, the threat picture that China has created for Taiwan. So I think naval activity is a serious concern for Taiwan, and I think it would be beneficial for the MND to let the public know what the scope of the PLA's naval activity is. Because I think the biggest challenge with this is that this is an acute security threat during peacetime. It has implications for wartime, but it's affecting Taiwan's security right now. But we don't know how badly unless we're told.
Now, there have been calls for Taiwan's defense ministry to provide more information about what exactly is happening in the ADIZ. But at the rate that we're seeing these numbers increase, one thing is very clear, and that's that China is trying to create a new normal.
That was our reporter Jaime Okan reporting from Taipei. Taiwan's politicians are having a rough week as another local leader has been sentenced after being convicted on corruption charges. Yilan County Magistrate Ling Zimiao has been sentenced to 12.5 years in prison by a district court. She will also be barred from holding public office for 6 years. The court found Ling guilty of misusing public funds, money laundering, and keeping improper records of her own income. Ling maintains that she's innocent. In the past week, a Taipei city councilor was sentenced, a former vice premier's trial began, and a former presidential candidate was indicted, all on corruption charges. An exhibition to relive Taiwan's journey to the WBSC Premier 12 Baseball Championship is kicking off in Taipei in the new year. Our reporter Sandy Chi gives us a sneak peek of the event.
A special exhibition is kicking off here in the heart of Taipei to help town's baseball fans relive the country's journey to the WBSC Premier 12 Championship. Called Behind the Champion, it's held at the National Taiwan Museum, next to what was originally the Taipei New Park Baseball Field. A day before the official opening of the exhibit, President Lai Ching-te visited it.
我要特别利用这个难得的机会，再次感谢我们国家代表队。 为国家争取最大的光荣，我也非常希望我们来看参展的民众，能够看到冠军杯的荣耀，看到冠军选手的不容易，也能够看到他们背后的辛苦。
Around 50 items are on display here, including the champion trophy, which is said to weigh up to 12 kilograms. Gloves, balls, helmets, and even the bases Taiwan's players took from the stadium in Tokyo are also here for visitors to see. The national team's manager Zheng Haoju says seeing these items brings out strong emotions.
每一段都是它有一个心路历程的一个故事。那我们希望说大家进场来看博物馆的时候，希望是来看我们的一个台湾的一个故事，这是属于台湾人的荣耀。
Among all the items, one marks the beginning of Team Taiwan's success at the tournament. It's the bat that slugger Chen Chengwei used to hit his Grand Slam. It was the first Grand Slam in Team Taiwan's history at the WBSC Premier 12 tournament and was also Chen's first one at an international event. The exhibition will be open to the public from January 1st to March 2nd, giving Taiwan's baseball fans enough time to visit and celebrate the country's triumph. Devon Sain Sanichi in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, we take you to Times Square in New York for a glimpse of the ball drop test. I'm Leslie Liao. Take care, and I'll see you next year.